This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
One thing we didn't talk about is right before chapter 1, there is a prophecy.
We haven't talked about that. Should I read that?
Yeah.
There's 2.
Yeah, I'll read do you mind if I read the first one?
No, go ahead.
So this is basically a description of what happens during the breaking. And the shadow fell upon the land, and the world was riven, stone from stone. The oceans fled, and the mountains were swallowed up, and the nations were scattered to the 8 corners of the world. The moon was as blood, and the sun was as ashes. The sea boiled, and the living envied the dead. All was shattered, and all but memory lost, and one memory above all others, of him who brought the shadow and the breaking of the world, and him they named the dragon. Once again, we're tying memory and the dragon together, right?
Yeah.
All memory lost, but one memory above all. What was that memory? That was the memory of the dragon, of he who brought the shadow.
I think most people don't really understand, or most people wouldn't have, even at the time, really understand what happened. So it is kind of interesting that I think even in chapter 1, the dragon is mentioned, but as a sort of evil character who broke the world and brought the shadow into it, which is not entirely true.
Yet at the same time, it is very true that his actions caused the breaking.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happens. The first few sentences are describing the breaking, right? The moon was his blood, the sun was his ashes, the sea boiled, the living envied the dead. Well, you have the world just breaking apart. All was shattered. And then you sort of have this all but memory lost, the memory of the dragon. The world is ended, and you are pissed at the one dude who did it.
Yeah.
And you remember him above anything else. You remember the man who rode off to seal the Dark One without the women on his own and caused the corruption of all male channelers.
Which is basically what ends the world.
And people remember that. And they call him the dragon.
And the kinslayer.
Hell, he did kill all his kin.
That's true.
Not exactly a fun, happy moment, but he did. So that was a little more of the breaking, but I just wanted to cover that they did pretty much, all of that last few episodes we've been talking about, the space between the 2 chapters. This is sort of a poetic version of that.
Yeah.
Time.
I do enjoy and just think it's interesting how the memory of the dragon persists like this 3,000 years later when chapter 1 begins. I believe it might be the 2nd or 3rd chapter, but there people talk about the dragon because of the tough times they're going through.
There's a section in chapter 1 where they're naming like the worst things I can possibly think of, and the first thing is the dragon, the second thing is the Forsaken, and the third thing is the Shadowman, because they're describing the Fade that's watching them.
Right.
And they're like, oh, what could it possibly be? And the first thing they think of is, oh, it's the dragon.
The Dragon Reborn.
The Dragon Reborn. That would be the worst possible thing,
right,
that could be following them around.
And I just really like how some of the truth still persists with the story about the dragon, but it's just muddled in misunderstanding.
Oh, and the next page I really love is the maps. I gotta say, I know that's a tradition started with Tolkien, but I fell in love with the maps in these books. That sort of half amorphous peninsula that is Randland on that first page is just, I don't know. I love looking at it. I can stare at it for hours.
Yeah, and when I do, there's a lot of memories here, and I just couldn't tell you how much time I've spent just like looking at this map to understand what was happening in the book,
and to trace the path of the various characters and see what cities they were in and what direction they're walking. And it's not really writing, but it's such an integral part of the story that the author came up with that I find it to be a really interesting look at the author's mind and what he planned to do. And you can't change the land once you have a map, right?
Like at what point he made the map in planning the story,
What's the other map there?
It's a map of the Two Rivers area, Tarrant Ferry, Devon Rye, Emmonsfield. When I reread chapter 1, I just really kind of hit me I think in a way that I didn't before, since it's been a while since I've done a read through, that most people have thatched roofing. You realize how backward that is? It's not even a real roof. It's just like dried grass.
Yeah.
Yeah, bundled. And then you just replace it every year.
And the water just runs right off of it. Yeah. And this is probably in a place that gets a good amount of snow too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. They have surprisingly good architecture, but I mean thatch roofs are cheaper. And Sen Bowie, right? He's the thatcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a lazy son of a bitch. No wonder roofs always leak.
So we have our opening, which is really beloved to me. Every book opens this way. I kind of want to read it. I guess I'll just read it.
Yeah, because let me put it this way. I think this is one of the most important paragraphs in all the books.
Not just because it repeats.
Not just because it repeats, but also because it repeats. But I think there's so much there, not only about what's going on, but also the wheel and time. We'll read it, and then I'll wax poetic about it.
Okay. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the third age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning.
I love that.
It's so goddamn poetic. It really is. We touched on this a little bit. I think it was during the prologue episode where there's a significant, when Dragon Mountain's being made, there are all these winds. And I thought it was sort of interesting that the prologue ends with this wind, and obviously a big event.
Right, the big mountain.
Yeah, the creation of a giant mountain.
Right.
But and then that every book that follows opens with this wind.
It's a beginning, right? Well, where does wind come from, right? Like the air heats up, some air rises, you get wind, right? It's something happens, something that was stable becomes unstable.
Sure.
That's what creates wind. And so that's sort of a beginning, is where you have stability in Rand's life, which is being a farm boy, and that is becoming unstable, and that's the beginning of the story. And so this sort of wind is always an instability. It's hot air moving to rising, or cool air falling. So you get this movement, and that's the beginning. Almost everything in this world has consequences. You have cause and effect is really important, right? Because the Dark One pretty much subverts cause and effect. Whenever he's stepping in, creating bowls of evil, he's destroying cause and effect.
Makes sense.
And so wind is the result of cause and effect. Next sentence. I also want to talk about like sort of an age past, an age long past, an age yet to come. Just because, this, I think some people have trouble. I have trouble remembering that this is not only what has happened, but what will happen.
And what has already happened. Yeah. That you have this sort of repeating cycle, and we're in the middle of it, and we're not necessarily in between this one and the next one. Like, the wheel turns a bunch of times. This could have been many turnings of the wheel ago. And we see Tam and Rand walking down, I believe what's called the Quarry Road, on their way to deliver a bunch of booze to the
right, yeah, a little bit of brandy
for a celebration.
Apple cider and some brandy. Like one of the things I noticed is this has apples as a bit of a theme, right? Clearly, Rand they must have an apple orchard if they're making apple cider and apple brandy. Yeah,
I was wondering that if they have their own orchard or if they buy or trade for apples and make it.
I would assume they have their own orchard.
Probably.
They've got a farm, yeah.
Tam seems pretty darn prodigious. Just in two men running a farm by themselves. Rand's only 18.
Right. No, and he barely remembers his mother, which means Tam was running a farm and raising a small child at the same time.
Nuts.
Yeah. Tam's a tough son of a... Yeah. He's a tough son of a bitch. He's a brewer. What can I say? The man knows how to make his apple cider.
Cecil the brewer. Have we mentioned that? I don't know if we mentioned that yet.
I do. I like making alcohol, which we then drink while we're recording this.
Are currently drinking.
And so they're coming in. They're traveling from out of town. Probably for what us would be like an hour drive, something pretty minor. Maybe not even that long, half an hour. So what do you think? It takes them a couple hours to walk it?
Yeah, I think it's a few hours. I think they mention it at some point in this chapter, but I don't remember exactly. But it seems like it takes a good portion of the day. Sure.
Yeah, and I can imagine the small Virginia town I used to live in had farms outside of town, and it was and they do say they're in sort of the roughest area, the furthest outside of town. So I could see them being a good 5, 6, 7 miles outside of town.
I'm looking at the map and just kind of trying to estimate. Because they're in the Waterwood. Emmons Field is in the center of this crossroads. There's no scale or anything here, but...
So why are they coming into town and bringing the brandy and the apple cider?
Well, there's this end of winter, beginning of spring celebration that's called... Beltane. Couldn't remember. There's also a Sunday. I wasn't somewhere in here.
And it's basically May Day, right? Because they've got a maypole.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen this ritual before at festivals where this huge pole is erected and people dance around it and wrap this multicolored cloths around it. In our world, it's supposed to be derived from some ancient fertility ritual.
Oh, wait. You're saying wrapping up a pole with nice,
up, boys.
Soft, silky, enveloping cloth by women? You're saying that's fertility related? I can't.
Yeah.
Why?
This takes place in the springtime.
Right.
But Rand mentions in his mind at some point that it's a ritual that nobody knows what it represents or where it came from. I speculated a little that it could be carried over all the way from the Age of Legends. We see at some point these planting rituals where the Green Men and Nael do this dance together and sing. Of course, there's actual magic happening there.
Well, there's definitely, they encourage the plants to grow, and the Ogier have the song. I want to know more about the Ogier, because I don't think the song is related to the One Power.
They call it the song, or do they call it the voice?
I think the talent is called the voice, and they sing a song.
Gotcha. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that LTT briefly in the prologue mentions it when he runs into Ishmael and he doesn't know who he is because he's insane. He says, "Oh, do you have the voice? We're going to have a celebration." Totally.
Yeah, I think that's saying, do you have the talent of singing?
Right.
So on the road, Rand and Rand sees a bit of a shadowy figure behind him, which is, of course, a Fade.
Rand is thinking about the weird weather, and I have this line underlined where he's describing the weather and then mentions the hairs on his arms stirred, his skin's prickled as if it itched on the inside. He shifted his bow irritably to rub at his arms and told himself to stop letting fancies take him. And this is where he trips on a stone and turns around to look because he feels weird. That line describing it. And he turns around, trips on a stone because he sees this rider in a black cloak.
Do you think that's a channeler sensing?
I think that goes for any human feels strange when the look of the eyeless falls upon them.
The Murdral state.
I don't know how else to say that. They're not looking at you.
Yeah, well,
I guess it's sort of like
they're looking at you without eyes.
Right. They're just directing their face toward you. Their creepy face. But Rand can't see his face.
Yeah. He can't see that the cloak doesn't move.
Right.
Which is, makes me think the Fades don't fully exist in this reality. They can't, because they're not affected by wind.
No, and they can ride shadows.
Which, by the way, let's talk about wind again, not affecting the Fades.
Because there's something outside of
something outside of this reality.
That was never really meant to be. We also know that they're some kind of inherently magical creature. They're definitely born with special abilities. Not only are they highly intelligent and unnaturally fast and agile and strong, but they can ride shadows, which is a magic that's never really described, but they can just disappear and reappear somewhere else where there's a shadow.
We do know they're totally accidental. They were not meant to be created. They were a side effect of the creation of the Trollocs.
Right. They're supposed to be spat out probably maybe somewhere around the percentage of channelers in the human population.
Yes, right. So I think if we can get into where Trollocs come from.
Sure.
The idea that Trollocs are human souls corrupted and reborn into animal bodies is my theory, and that whenever you have where that soul would normally be born with a spark to channel, instead of becoming a Trolloc, they become a Myrddraal.
Yeah.
And which is why the rates are the same, because essentially they would be the channelers of the Trollocs.
Twisted by the shadow, the Myrddraal get certain special abilities. One is being able to, can I say manipulate emotions? Does that make sense? Or certainly their presence brings fear, which is some kind of magical trait.
I'm not sure if it's magical or if it's just the fact that they see us as prey, and there's something instinctive in us that freezes and fears that.
Yeah, maybe.
You're right that I think it is. That whatever that induces that is probably a part of their nature and magical.
Yeah. There's the shadow riding. They can sense channeling. We know that.
Definitely. Which is the other reason why I think they may be channelers reborn.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So there's a lot of evidence pointing to the Fades as being corrupted souls.
Are there any other special abilities?
I mean, they're fast.
Unnaturally fast and strong. And seemingly always intelligent. Like, you never run into a stupid Myrddraal in this whole thing.
No, the Fades know what they're doing. That being said, they still they have a priority they want to kill.
Yeah.
They like the Trollocs, want to kill you. And in some ways that makes them predictable and controllable. So we've got our first glimpse of a Fade. Immediately, Rand falls into the flame in the void to control himself, which I think it's a great meditation technique, but it is something that he learns from Thom, that Thom learned while he was fighting with swords. But it's the key to channeling.
Right.
And right there in the beginning, like he's practices the flame in the void as sort of a centering technique whenever he feels anxiety.
Or tries to.
Yeah.
And, he may actually be doing it some success here, because if he can maintain eye contact with a Fade without really any other training other than what his father has taught him, that's because we see later soldiers and things that are just freeze in their tracks and are slaughtered without raising their weapon, just for their first time experiencing the look of the eyeless. So the fact that he can even think is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, he's got some stubbornness to him. He's a farmer. He's tough and hardy. Sort of helps him survive, I think, his exposure to the One Power too. Like, Sidene is this thing you have to fight, and I think that stubbornness helps him anchor himself many, many times throughout the series. And certainly, Jordan talks about the stubbornness constantly.
I'm just reading through this really quick to see what's going on in Rand's head exactly. Queasiness settled in his stomach. There was only shadow to see in the hood. And I really like this. But he felt hatred as sharply as if he could see a snarling face. Hatred for everything that lived. Hatred for him most of all. For him above all things. Then he trips and stumbles and turns and looks at Tam and tries to yell hey, there's somebody following us. And Tam turns around and the Fade is gone. I really like to think because the Fade knows better than to get in a fight with Tam Althor. That the Fade might actually lose, but considering what we know about Tam.
That's entirely possible. I think it's more likely that the Fades are just trying to avoid detection.
Probably.
Yeah, but I like that idea.
Yeah. When I read that.
Oh, man, don't fuck with Tam. Tam he's a sword master.
Right.
We don't see too many of those in this series. And he won his sword, which is kind of impressive.
Yeah, he's an accomplished soldier.
And that comes up way later, but he definitely...
Yeah, we don't find that out for a long time.
Right. So they eventually... Rand's like, oh, yeah, I guess I didn't see this fade, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
He's not there. He knew something was wrong because the cloak didn't move, so he was like, it's not
Must
real.
have been my imagination.
Right. But, what I love is if he just said to Thom, the cloak didn't move, Thom would have known immediately that was a fade.
Right.
But Rand never says that out loud. All he says is, oh, I guess he's not there anymore.
Because to him, it's impossible.
It's impossible. It's ridiculous. But of course Thom would know what a fade is without.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that the boys do a lot is they keep things to themselves, and they would, if they just told the adults around them.
Oh, throughout the series.
So often.
Man, when I'm going through it again, I'm just like, just tell Moraine everything.
Oh, I know.
Just trust her. Damn it.
But, I think this incident in and of itself is one of the reasons why that Rand doesn't necessarily trust adults. Because right in the beginning, he turns to Tam and says, hey, there's a dude there. And Tam says, where? There's no dude. And Rand's like, well, maybe I shouldn't.
Yeah, he doesn't want to look like a fool.
Yeah, so maybe he doesn't immediately go to the adults when he starts having weird dreams.
Sure.
That's... maybe he doesn't immediately go to Moraine and tell her all the things that are going on.
And he doesn't realize that there's a threat here.
Sure.
Either.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a weird guy looking at you.
One thing I wanted to see what you think about is, so we have that little exchange. Tam wants to go check, and Rand calls him back and says, I think I'm just making things up. But Tam says at some point, a horse leaves hoof prints, even on this ground. Would a Fade's horse leave hoof prints? Is there anything that we know about that? It's not even is it a horse?
Oh, yeah, they ride horses. Yeah.
But I mean, is it a real horse?
Yeah, sure. They would leave. They probably would leave footprints. I bet that if they had checked, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't leave footprints. Now, it might be a weird pattern because it might be like footprints coming out of a shadow.
Okay, yeah.
But the reason they don't go check is because the cloak doesn't move in the wind. And so Rand's like, oh, it must have been like a tree or something. Like, I think that he doubts himself in that moment.
Sure. Well, he saw something that's basically physically impossible.
Right. And felt something, but just because you feel fear, in and of itself, it wasn't, you thought you saw a hooded cloak, but you didn't see his face. How many times have you turned around?
I probably wouldn't say anything either. It's kind of embarrassing.
Right. I mean, how many times have you turned around and like waved at somebody you thought was waving at you and like they weren't, or you saw like a coat on a rack and thought it was a dude standing in the corner. Like,
sure.
You're just like, oh, I swore I saw somebody, but I'm not going to say anything.
And they enter the two rivers.
So the first thing they start talking about, isn't that the fact that the weather is really crappy? As most things happen in a small town when you walk in, the first thing you talk about, of course, is the weather.
Right.
And they immediately go to, well, the weather's crappy, but, we'll survive the light willing, and if the light doesn't will, we'll still survive. It's just that stubbornness that they really bring out.
That's pretty much a direct quote.
It is a direct quote.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just, that sort of embodies not only the two rivers, but sort of the people as a whole is like, we'll survive if you want us to. And even if you don't want us to, we're still going to figure out a way to survive.
Mm-hmm. That was the way of most two rivers people.
Right.
That's the next line.
And that's really important for Rand. I think that he would not have overcome the adversity that he encounters if he didn't have that attitude of, it doesn't matter how hard you get hit, you just get up and keep going.
Right. To all our Two Rivers characters, which are pretty much, I mean, they're the core of the...
Oh, sure.
Or a huge part of it. I mean, we have Moraine and Lan and a few other major characters.
Elaine.
Thom.
Thom.
But our core here are all from the Two Rivers.
Sure. So, and then I love they start getting into the politics right away, and it's like, well, these small town politics that we see right here in the first chapter are such a mirror for the big town politics that we see much later.
Yeah. One of the first things that happened is Senbui steps in front of the Tam's horse cart and stops it, and essentially just wants to complain about this new village wisdom, which is basically, so there's a mayor and a wisdom, and they're roughly equal. Roughly. It seems like the women have a little bit more power in the local government, but it's run divided by sex.
You're delusional. The women have all the power. The women have all the power. They let the men think they have some power. The men have no power. What it boils down to is the women are able to decide what's women's business and what's not. Pretty much lets them go along with the decisions that the men make when they agree. And when they disagree, they just declare it women's business and take over and do it their way.
Yeah, there's some stuff in there. It seems like basically if the problem involves any kind of relationship, it's women's circle business, and that's pretty much all problems.
What are you saying? Relationships are problematic?
Yes. Okay, maybe that's a reflection of my life right now. Ooh. Towards the end, where Senbui's complaining to Tam, and Tam is completely disinterested in what he has to say, Senbui says, "Well, we better do something, Althor. She said we'd have a mild winter, a good harvest. Now you ask her what she hears on the wind, she just scowls at you and stomps off." And I wanted to throw that out there because I believe later we do actually hear about what Nynaeve was hearing on the wind. And she mentions something like it was very confusing. Like she'd wake up one day and try to listen to the wind, and it would say it's going to be a beautiful sunny day. And she'd wake up the next day and say it's going to snow. And it was almost never correct.
I have theories.
Well, the Dark One is manipulating the weather himself, right? Or what are your theories?
She's foretelling.
Okay.
So growing up, she learns how to read the winds. It's basically a sense of foretelling. You're foretelling the weather. What's the most important thing to a farmer? The weather.
Right.
So that's what she ends up foretelling.
And we hear Nynaeve also later says that some wisdoms listen to the wind by observing the birds and insects and weather patterns, and they have a pretty good sense of what's going to happen. Other wisdoms are particularly gifted.
Right. And I think they're basically channelers.
Literally listening to the weather.
Right. And so I do think it's a bit of a talent for foretelling, that she's foretelling the weather. And then when that sense shifts from foretelling the weather to the most important events that are happening around her, which are, of course, Moraine and the Trollocs, that foretelling shifts from foretelling the weather to foretelling events that are going to happen to her.
But she's putting things in terms of weather because she doesn't know what she's doing.
Exactly. So when she feels a disaster coming, she feels it as a storm. When she feels...
which is the namesake of the Gathering Storm, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So
she feels it and mentions it.
So I think that her feelings are a bit of prophecy, honestly, tied to the one power.
I never had that thought before. I like that theory.
But yeah, just a theory.
I always just sort of assume that she's somehow observing the patterns of the weather in the pattern itself, the pattern of the world.
Also entirely possible.
And something's manipulating the weather. We know that. Either the Dark One or Ishmael, I'm not sure. And she's sensing the chaos or the manipulation.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. Hey, let us know. What do you think? What is the reading the weather? What is her listening to the wind? Is she foretelling the weather? Is she listening to the Dark One twisting events? I don't know. We've got some theories here. Throw us a few more.
Email us.
Definitely. So then we get past Senbui, and his complaints about women.
Mm-hmm. His wife storms out and says, "Shut up about the wisdom. We don't even want to hear you talking about it."
That's wisdom. That's women's business.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. You determine that's wisdom business, women's business. So let's move on. Oh, one other thing I just wanted to say about the weather is, the weather is the land is sort of a character and the dragon is the land, and so the weather is very much tied to sort of his moods and his sort of feelings, and
it's a major plot device through the whole series.
Yeah, that's something I'll bring up repeatedly is how the weather is affected by Rand.
Like the next couple of paragraphs, Rand describes how like Tam and Rand are avoid eye contact with the wives, like doing work around their houses because they're trying to set up both of them.
Oh yeah, that whole thing about like, so how old are you?
Then asked with elaborate casualness exactly how old he was now.
Hey, you got two bachelors. I mean,
yeah,
we get repeatedly that Rand's a good-looking dude. You know, the women aren't, and Tam's steady.
Tam's a really good man,
dude. Yeah, I'd marry Tam.
Yeah,
fuck
yeah,
sure. I wouldn't. Or he could just be my dad. That would be totally awesome too.
Yeah, be an upgrade. I mean, it's an upgrade on pretty much everybody's dad.
Right. Yeah, anyone's. I mean, are you as awesome as Tam? No. Is your dad as awesome as Tam? No,
probably not.
No, that's just the truth. So we roll into town. We got a cart full of cider and apple brandy, and it's got to get unloaded into the inn. So who strolls up but main character number 2, Matt Cawthon.
So Sen, Tam, and Bran are standing there arguing about Sen being a whiny person.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you have some small town politics thrown in there. You know, it's just like, oh yeah, this is what people argue about in small. You know, like again, all politics are local. You know, these little political things that he throws in here in the beginning that are sort of just background noise really do affect how Rand interacts with I think some of the lords and kings later on in the series.
Sure, views the whole world.
Yeah.
So these 3 important men in the village are standing around, kind of softly arguing, and a quick tug at Rand's sleeve and a voice pitched low for his ear alone distracted him from the older men's talk. Come on, Rand, while they're still arguing, before they put you to work.
There's Matt trying to avoid the work.
Rand glanced down and had to grin. Matt Cawthon crouched beside the cart, so Tam, Bran, and Sen could not see him.
This is the first part where I really want to look at the difference between what Matt says and what Matt does.
Yeah. I just got to say, Matt is so instantly recognizable. Like his character, this is his character throughout the entire book.
Totally.
He really barely matures. He's still the same kid. Like he just gains experiences.
Right.
This is Matt right here.
Totally. But again, it's the difference between what he does and what he says. He always says the same things, and he always does the same things, and they're never in agreement. Because what is he saying? Quick, let's get out of here before we put you to work. What does he do? He helps unload all the cider.
Toting barrels, burn me. I'd rather play stones with my baby's sister. He's one of his next line.
Totally. Complains about it. Awful. But read the next paragraph. What is he doing? Unloading barrels.
Yep. And yeah, you're right. I never really had that thought, but throughout the series, he's always saying, no, like, I don't want to be involved in this. Like, I just want to go, like, have a drink and squeeze some girl's butt. And then he's always jumping in to save the day.
Always.
He definitely feels like it's his responsibility. Next, Rand and Matt. Matt says there are strangers in the 2 rivers. And Rand's like, was it a man in a black cloak? And Matt, like, pauses. And he says, you saw him too? Matt also mentions to Rand that it was very difficult to pull his eyes away from the man in black, but he also manages to, which is also impressive.
That is impressive. Sorry. Catechism is a summary or exposition of doctrine and serves as a learning introduction to the sacraments traditionally used in Christian religious teaching of children.
Oh, wait, catechism? Or
is that
could it possibly be that way?
Yeah. Catechism. Yeah, that's the word. I've never actually heard that word pronounced out loud.
Oh. Yeah, it's a Catholic thing.
Yeah, well.
Or maybe also, I don't know.
I think it is Catholic. But that sort of, how do you say it again? Catechism? Catechism. Okay, so that whole segment about the Dark One and all the Forsaken are bound in Sheol Ghoul, that's sort of a catechism of the world, because they're not Catholic, but that is, we have Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. They have the Dark One and all the Forsaken are bound in Sheol Ghoul.
Right.
And the whole prayer there, that whole catechism is the Dark One and all the Forsaken are bound in Sheol Ghoul beyond the great blight, bound by the Creator at the moment of creation, bound until the end of time. The hand of the world shelters the world, and the light shines on us on all. And it's so wrong.
Yeah. Well, once it was true. Very long time ago.
Well, I think the Dark One and the Forsaken are bound in Sheol Ghoul has always been wrong.
Yeah, the Forsaken aren't bound.
Not all of them.
And the Dark One only for a little.
Mm-hmm.
Till now, basically.
Although, I guess he is bound until the end of time, because as soon as he's not bound, time ends.
Right. So.
Sort of.
By definition.
By definition, yeah. The hand of the Creator shelters the world, and the light shines on us all. The light shining on us all, I think, is just basically them saying we have channelers. Matt's able to pull away from the eyeless there. It's almost important that they sort of get used to the eyeless gaze. They sort of experience it repeatedly here in the beginning, so that when they encounter it later, it's something they're accustomed to.
Yeah, this fade chases them clear to Berlon.
The fade?
Mm-hmm.
Camelin?
All the way to Camelin? Well, Thom slows it down.
Right, but I think it's still coming after them, isn't it?
I can't remember. Does Thom kill it?
No, not at all. It just pushes them aside and keeps going.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I
thought he delays it or something so that they can run.
They delays it so they get away, but it doesn't stop just because he delayed it for a few minutes or a few seconds. So
we should probably wait until we get there.
Yeah,
it's not that far.
We're getting ahead of ourselves. Oh man, how?
I always imagined he killed the thing.
I don't think so.
I just kind of want to believe that, I guess.
No, he didn't. I mean, well, there's difference between what he says versus what he does. Thom. He says the thing just pushed him off and kept going because it wasn't interested in him.
Oh, but it's highly likely he's lying. He wouldn't want anyone to know he could kill a Fade if he had to.
Right.
He does later, if I'm not mistaken, at some point.
Yeah, sort of at the end when everyone's overpowered and Fades are sort of less important. They're, as with any series like this, in order to continue upping the stakes, some of the early bad guys become less threatening at the end.
Right. I'm kind of remembering now. With that first encounter, he sinks a couple knives into its face and just, well, we know that's not really.
No, it just plucks them out and keeps going.
Right.
Yeah. That right now we're getting an introduction to the characters. A lot of these characters that we see later on, even some of the ones that are just mentioned by name, become relatively significant speaking parts, especially when Perrin goes back to the Two Rivers.
Yeah. So next we see Matt and Rand just talking about that they had both seen the Shadow Man and trying to construct some sort of strategy to tell the adults who they don't think will believe them. Yeah,
and we notice this is really the last time they try and tell the adults anything.
You're right, I think. Rand and Matt are having this conversation with Matt presumably crouched on the other side of a wagon wheel from the adults. And then Tam just walks up to the cart and super chill just sort of greets Matt. And I think it tells us a little bit about Tam there. It's a cool little comment on his character that he notices Matt is there, but is just a sweetheart about it. And he says, "Good morning, Matrim," Tam said brightly, hefting one of the brandy casks up onto the side of the cart. "I see you've come to help Rand unload the cider. Good lad." Matt leapt to his feet at the first word and began backing away. "Good morning to you, Master Althor, and to you, Master Alvir. Master Buey, may the light shine on you." And he's backing away this whole time.
No, not work. Oh God.
Yeah, it's just a nice comment on his character, and of course he gets roped into helping carry the barrels.
I know some people complain that Matt doesn't necessarily become a character until after his healing in the second, third book.
Do you think so?
I disagree. Yeah, no, I don't agree. I think that We see, his character sort of gets subverted by the dagger, and so there's a period of time where we sort of don't see Matt, where we see...
Right, or we just see like irrational, crazy Matt.
Irrational, crazy Matt, yeah, totally. But here, we get sort of that glimpse of funny, prankster, doesn't want to do any work Matt, that really becomes the person we know and love later once he becomes healed.
Yeah, and as personally my favorite character, it's really cool to see him here just being himself. Like, so right away, page 16 is Matt acting like Matt. The subject matter changes, but he acts the same way.
Totally.
Throughout the series. I just think he's funny and, I don't know, enjoyable. He's also a badass character.
Oh, so many ways. I think the next thing they talk about is the Gleeman, right?
Yeah, it's right here. Matt gets roped in. Tam mentions that there is indeed a Gleeman here.
And so he came down from Barrelon.
Right.
So he wouldn't normally travel down. He was sort of traveling through Barrelon, which is sort of still a pretty small city, but at least it's a city. Somehow he got hired to come on down to the Two Rivers and for the festival. And I also found it interesting that he was more exciting than fireworks.
Yeah. Do we know how long Tom's been on the run for?
Yes, I do know, because his nephew, Owen, was killed in that nastiness that occurred with the Red Aja, and I want to say...
I probably have it in my notes here. Well, I know I do, but I just have to find it. Looks like 984, 985. He has the confrontation with Elida and Morghese.
Right, that makes sense.
And sometime around there, he also assassinates Terengel de Madrid. So I think for multiple reasons, Morghese was really pissed at him.
Well, he's comes back because he's basically leaves unexpectedly because he hears about what's going on with his nephew, and so he takes off to try and help him. And when he comes back, he encounters...
Right, he confronts Elida after the whole...
Yeah, absolutely.
Publicly in Morghese's court, which I'm sure just that alone pissed her off.
Oh yeah, I think that was the incident that got him thrown out. Is that he basically came back from having his nephew killed by the Red Aja, and he got up in Elida's face.
Right.
And Morghese is not the kind of queen that's going to take that well.
No, it's her fucking court.
I really do think that his nephew was gentled without proper procedure.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Because Thom confronts Elida directly in Morghese's court, which is like a really public situation. And that gets back to the tower. And then I think all of the Red Sitters at the time are exiled because of this incident. Because the way that they carried out Owen's gentling was illegal under Tower law. That's something that you have to do paperwork for. You can't just go around attacking people.
Do you know why they broke protocol?
They think he's the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah. They're looking for men of a certain age who can channel, and the Black Aja is going in there and gentling them.
And Owen would only be...
I think Owen was exactly Rand's age.
Right around there.
Yeah. Which is again why Thom identifies so much with Rand, because he would be exactly his nephew's age. And why is he exactly his nephew's age? Because that's the age of boys the Black Aja was hunting down, because they were looking for Rand. So really, the whole reason Thom's nephew was gentled and killed is the work of the Black, looking for the Dragon Reborn.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I just sort of interpreted it as some overzealous Red Sisters, but even jerky Red Sisters wouldn't do something like that.
No, they would shield him and bring him back to the tower and gentle him properly.
Right.
Not to say that's the greatest alternative at this point, but at least that would have been legal under the law.
Yeah.
And that law was broken because the Red Aja didn't want to take the chance that they discovered that they discovered the Dragon Reborn, and they were, let's cut him off as soon as we possibly can. We want to do anything. They're looking for glory in the Dark One's eyes.
Yeah.
Because that's what they talk about when they talk about the nastiness that occurred during those years. It's a bunch of Red Sisters running around, hunting down and gentling or killing young boys.
Right.
That were of a certain age.
Aes Sedai refer to it as the vileness.
The vileness. Yes, I keep calling it the
period.
nastiness, but the vileness is...
Yeah.
Thom is on the road and is a court bard because of Rand. And this is, again, Teviran at work. Rand needed Thom.
And Thom got brought.
And Thom got brought.
Pulled right into the web.
Yep. Entirely because Rand was born.
Moraine's there on purpose, but she's in the web.
Well, she's there because there was a prophecy.
Yeah, but she's been searching for a long time now.
20 years?
Yeah.
Since he was born. There's a lot of rumors going on. That definitely becomes a bit of a trope throughout the whole series, is just, rumors. So they're never accurate, but they're always got a little bit of truth in them.
Yeah.
Ideas that are passed between people distort and corrupt and fade over time. You never get the fully original story.
Yeah. I don't want to get too into rumors because we start seeing them in chapter 3.
Right,
Yeah.
totally. And then I also think isn't there a hint about fireworks being used as guns right away? I caught something. I made a little note about that, but I don't have the direct reference. That was the last little thing I said. Just a little thought that I was sort of talking about. Maybe just the fact that there are fireworks right away. We live in a society where fireworks are something, and so, I think Jordan immediately looked at the fact that they have fireworks and said, that's going to be guns by the end of the series. And he put that in, that little bit, that they have gunpowder basically right in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And it does play a major role later.
Totally. So I think that little bit about fireworks being in there, the entire reason that they're so excited about fireworks and why that's a point in the first chapter is because guns become important later on.
What does Matt name his artillery again? Little Dragons or something like that?
It's dragons. It's all
Dragons.
Altera. What's her name? The one with the braids. Aludra.
That's right.
She names them dragons.
But she also wants to name the explosives that are delivered eggs.
Right.
Dragon's eggs.
Dragons' eggs.
Which is appropriate.
I guess, but at what point in the series do we think about dragons as lizards that lay eggs? I feel like that's not something that's necessarily brought up.
No, I mean, we have the symbols.
Right.
Like, that is
The
a
gold
thing.
dragon, that's right.
The clan chief tattoos.
Right. But there's no other reference to them laying eggs as far as I know.
No.
How does chapter 1 end?
It just ends with them finishing up unloading the cart.
Right. So
There's a lot of conversation here. It's about the strangers, the fireworks, the weather.
So we're getting a lot of exposition, sort of some idea of what the world's like and what these sort of village folk think about the world around them and how excited they get about fireworks.
Yeah. And a storyteller.
And a storyteller, yeah, and a juggler. What for us is the boring age. So yeah. And chapter 2 starts with strangers. So I'm really excited to actually start the book proper. What I've been looking forward to is really getting to our main characters and sort of introducing them. It's as much as I really love the history part of this, what I love is the writing and the reading of the story.
Yeah, it's been fun to do the background, but this is the real intent of the podcast, to do it chapter by chapter.
But I gotta say, I'm glad we did the test episodes and took the time to go through the history just as a starting point, also to help us.
Yeah, that was really fun. Seth's doing like all the technology, so props to him.
Yeah, learning as I go, so I apologize if there's any problems. What I think has really been astonishing to me is the response I've seen online from the community, and just the number of support and the number of downloads we've been getting is I think shocking.
To put it in my own words, I really expected to maybe get a half a dozen downloads on each episode or something. I mean, not that we're getting an insane amount, but there's actually attention. So there's dozens and dozens of people paying attention.
There are dozens of us. But yeah, we're measuring you in the dozens instead of in the ones and the twos. So that's a surprise to us. So Wheel of Time fans out there, we thank you a lot. And if you want to contact us, let's put that out there because we've got a few presences online. WOT Spoilers is pretty much where you're going to find us. At WOT Spoilers is our Twitter handle. WOTSpoilers@gmail is our email.
Say hello.
Where else are we?
Or whatever you want.
Oh, yeah. On Reddit, we are user WOT Spoilers, and we frequently post in the subreddit for Wheel of Time.
Feel free to yell complaints at us, too, over the internet. We were just talking about this, and I think we've received 0 negative feedback so far. Like, nobody has had not even one jerk on the internet.
Come on, internet. I'm really disappointed in
What
you
do
folks.
you do?
Yeah.
What is happening? I mean, the Wheel of Time communities online are always I don't think I've ever really ran into a jerk on a forum like that. Shout out to guy that runs Dragon Mount.
Jason Denzel was the name of the Dragon Mount. He's I believe one of the founders of Dragon Mount, and he just messaged us and said hello, and we really appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, I think there's even a little bit of praise in there. Is that possible?
No,
no, he said he listened.
He said he was
enough.
Going to listen.
Okay. This is getting downgraded really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just very, very cool to get feedback from like a known member of the fan community. So we are in the fan community, but we are not known.
No. I would say we lurk around the fan community, really.
Yeah, I rarely post anything.
I've occasionally put a few things out there that I'm pretty happy with, but for the most part, people answer the questions before I can get to them, and I enjoy reading what other people say, but I'm not on there often enough to be the first responder.
Yeah, I mean, usually, I was just about to say, by the time I get to somebody's question on the subreddit, somebody's already answered it sufficiently. I don't really have much to add. People are paying attention to us, and that's really cool.
That's really cool. So, let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything you want us to talk about, or, if you please fact check us. We're just two people, and we're going to make mistakes. We don't catch everything that happens. This is a big series.
Oh, I'm sure we already have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Questions, comments, criticisms, and corrections. If we start getting a significant amount, I would totally add that as like a little section of the podcast. That sounds like a good little corrections.
Go beyond the bookkeeping and get into the story.
Yeah. Hey, would it be cool if we pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
Just take a leak.